Good morning, everyone. It's 10 a.m. and we're going to begin this meeting. For our first item this morning, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Coley and ask him if he will please call the roll. And Mr. Coley, I need to let you know that Commissioner Simpson Brown is not going to be able to join us today.
Thank you. Commissioner Askew?
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Here.
Commissioner Herbert?
Here.
Commissioner Pennell? Commissioner Pennell?
Sorry. Here.
Commissioner Small?
Here.
Commissioner Worden?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum and all present except for Commissioner Simpson Brown.
All right. Pursuant to Executive Order 16 issued by Governor Bill Lee, which allows for this public meeting to be conducted by electronic means to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, I'd like to entertain a motion that this board makes the determination for this meeting to be conducted electronically. Commissioners, to make a motion, please start by stating your name. Is there a motion?
Jerry S. So moved.
Celeste Herbert, second.
Is there any discussion from the commissioners? Hearing none, Mr. Coley, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Askew?
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert?
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell?
Aye.
Commissioner Small?
Aye.
Commissioner Worden?
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Our next item of business is approval of the meeting minutes from March 12th, 2020, as mailed to the commissioners. Commissioners, we need a motion, and again, to make a motion, please start by stating your name, and we'll need a motion and a second.
Tavi Small, so moved.
Jerry S.
Celeste Herbert, second.
Is there any discussion from the commissioners? Hearing none, Mr. Coley, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Askew?
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert?
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell?
Aye.
Commissioner Small?
Aye.
Commissioner Worden?
Aye.
Minutes from March 19, 2020 have been passed.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. There is no official action, other official action by the board today. But before we adjourn the board meeting and begin the financial workshop, is there any other business or comments from any of the commissioners? All right, with no other business from the commissioners, we will now hear from members of the public who wish to address the board. With our public notice for this electronic meeting, we ask members of the public to pre-register for public comment so that we may connect them to the meeting. We had 2 members of the public who registered, Kent Minot and Stan Johnson. Each will have 5 minutes to share their comments. We'll now take a brief pause as our meeting producer, Jay Miller, connects with Mr. Minot.
Chair Hamilton, we have Mr. Minot on the phone.
All right. Hello, Mr. Minot. You will have 5 minutes to address the board, and you do not have the advantage of having our lights as you normally do at the podium. So please keep track of your time and keep your comments to 5 minutes.
Okay, Chair Hamilton, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I hope you all are well. And my gratitude to all the KUB workers who've been keeping the lights on for us. And don't worry, my comment today will be short. I'm basically here to bring the support of the Sierra Club to what my friend Stan Johnson is about to say to you when it's his turn. He's going to talk a bit about some energy efficiency programs and energy education in low-income communities in your service area. And despite the pandemic, this is the perfect time to expand efficiency upgrades. After the 20-year contract negotiations, there's money available for it. And energy efficiency is an immediate economic stimulus, which we really need right now. Communities in question need credible messengers to spread the word about efficiency upgrades. Hiring those messengers is job creation, and the upgrades significantly lower utility bills. Community Voices recently surveyed low-income Knoxville. People listed three main concerns: gun violence, youth opportunity, high utility bills. New funding for a KEEM-type program handles two of those three, and I suspect we'd make progress on the third as well. In short, please listen to Stan and see if you can do what he says. Expand jobs in low-income communities, lower utility bills, and reduce greenhouse gases. Thank you so much for your attention, and please, all of you, stay well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minot. Our next speaker is Stan Johnson. Jay, if you would please connect Mr. Johnson.
Chair Hamilton, we have Mr. Johnson on the phone.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson. You will have 5 minutes to address the board, and as I said previously to Mr. Minot, we don't have the advantage of having lights this morning, so you do have 5 minutes, and if you would please try to keep up with your time, I'll let you know when that 5 minutes is passed.
All right, thank you very much. I hope I won't take all the 5 minutes up. First, just wanted to thank KUB for all the work that you guys are doing in the community, and thank you for making this deal with TVA to make more opportunity for this community as well. I just want to make sure that the community itself has a say in how that money is being spent and how it can be allocated. Of course, I know there's areas that you guys are looking at as well. But I want to make sure that we all have an equity portion of this process. The community should benefit as well as just from this, as well as KUB. And I want to make sure that I'm not speaking anything ill at any time. I just want to make sure that making sure I'm saying KUB is doing a good job. I appreciate it. I just want to see us do some more stuff together. Want to make sure that we're understanding each other, communicating better. And the big thing is being able to put more money into where those communities have been hurt the most in weatherization to make sure that their utility bills can be cut down. I know we're doing some now with the Rounded Up. I'd like to see that to go up more, as much as maybe even as $1 million. Also, just wanted to make sure that the city plan that's reduced carbon in the next 20 and 30 years, and also reduce half in the community, that plan goes along with the stuff the KUB is doing. I think that's going to be a great team process to do. Just want to make sure that our community is being aware of the things that are actually happening in that. So I'd also like to figure a way that 1% of this money can go back towards community engagement, engaging the community from trusted stakeholders. We'll also help with workforce development for young people to go out in their own communities and be able to be the ones that are telling people about what's happening in KUB, which is going to be a great partnership as well. Also being able to get the people that are actually getting the benefit from these weatherization, such as Rounded Up funds are going to now, and what KEEM did as well. Just really ramping those programs up and getting those young people in the streets to talk about the greatness that KUB is doing and the things that they can do to actually help out their own community. And also just really being able to reach deeply into what we're looking at to be the future. I thank you guys for what you're doing with the corona outbreak as well. If we could get some more information out into our communities about what KUB is doing, that'll be awesome. And that's really all I have to say. I just wanted to thank you guys very much for all the stuff that you guys are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That concludes the public comment portion of today's board meeting. This board meeting is now adjourned. We will now begin the budget workshop, and I'd like to recognize Gabe Bolus to introduce the fiscal year 2021 budget workshop.
Commissioners, good morning. Welcome to this year's financial plan. To put it lightly, a lot has changed in the last month. And you'll see today that we're constantly making changes to how we do business. It's important that we maintain strong service and make sure we're serving our customers. And so even with the format of this meeting and how different it is, things are just constantly evolving. I hope through this presentation, you'll see how serious we're taking the impact our services have on our customers, especially their day-to-day lives and financially. And so we're going to recommend some changes today that will hopefully benefit our customers tremendously. Before we begin the financial workshop, I do want to give you an update on what KUB has done through the pandemic so far. Just after our last board meeting, we established our incident command structure. It's our ICS structure, which we use a lot for storms, but this is obviously something totally different. But that format and that structure has given us a lot of direction, a lot of stability through this process. We began at level 4, which is what everybody is doing in the country, which is social distancing, canceling plans, and asking our folks that can work from home to do so. We've now transitioned to a level 3. A third of our company is working from home. And we have, restricted some work, especially work that's in the homes. We have any planned work in the homes we have canceled. And as you know, we closed our walk-in centers on April 1st. We're stable right now and we hope it stays that way, but we have looked forward and planned for a level 2 or level 1. Hopefully that won't happen. I think the flattening of the curve seems to be working, but we'll watch it and see. And hopefully we won't need to go to those levels, but if we do, we're fully prepared for that. We're also doing a lot of things to protect our employees because they are working and have to work and need to work every day to maintain this system our customers expect. We are constantly cleaning our facilities and vehicles to make sure they're as safe as possible. We're making sure that we maintain a good stock of PPE for them to use. Our nurses in the occupational health department have been phenomenal. They've been answering lots of questions, keeping our folks up to date on what's going on as things change. And we are also constantly communicating with our employees. We usually send out an email every day just to make them aware of what's going on and the trends that we're seeing. So that's really been beneficial to them. But also beyond just our employees, we want to make sure that we continue to serve our customers with what they expect, especially now a lot of them are home and depend on us even more. But we also want to make sure we take care of them financially. As you know, and I said earlier, we did suspend disconnects about a month ago, and we closed all the walk-in centers. In doing so, we waived all fees. No matter how you pay a KUB bill, those fees have been waived. And so we try to make it easy for our customers to pay. And just this week, we have announced that we're waiving all late fees for customers who will reach out to us and work out arrangements, look for assistance, those type of things. So that's something we just rolled out to once again lessen the burden on our customers as much as we can. We are constantly using social media to talk to our customers and allow them to have updates that we get. And if any assistance comes available, there's lots of discussion about other funding sources. As those come available, we'll make sure our customers know about it to help pay their utility bills. Bottom line is we want to make sure we're reliable and safe, but we got to make sure that they also can afford to get through this crisis together. And so that requires a lot of balance in our systems right now. And fortunately, we're built for that. Our blueprint speaks volumes to that. It doesn't change because of this pandemic. We exist to serve our customers. It's more important than ever now that things have changed. And part of that's also maintaining and making sure we take care of our customers' resources. That includes the dollars that we spend and the environment we serve, we work in. And so in the short term, we know folks will need financial assistance, and we will make sure we help them get that. And so I hope you'll see throughout today that we're doing that very well. And I think our plan achieves that. We are committed to Century 2. We've got a good plan. We want to maintain that as best we can. We know that we have things projects to get done this next year. We also want to announce that as of this week, the advanced meter deployment is finished. We set the last meter yesterday, and that's been a 4-year project that I'm proud to say has gone really well and has just completed, and all meters have now been exchanged. We'll also have to commit to getting our wastewater consent decree behind us. And we have the last project fully underway, and we'll be finishing this next year and allow us to meet that obligation that we've been under for the last 17 years. And then you'll hear a lot about sustainability today. We're committed to doing even more of that, and Susan will talk about that later. One thing also I want to talk about is lowering future rate increases, and we do that by reducing O&M and capital costs in all 4 of our utilities. They're very important to us, and we want to make sure we meet all of our customers' needs and expectations while maintaining the reliability they've been used to for years. So as we continue to focus on the long term, this year's a little different. We're going to focus on the short term, more about what's going on today. We've had to make some changes in the last month to allow some things to adjust. And so this year's budget will be basically flat. Mark's going to talk about that a lot later and get a lot of detail of that. And we also want to talk about the partnership credit we discussed last month. We've already committed to the Green Invest program, and later on you'll hear from Susan how we want to increase the funding for low-income energy efficiency programs. But the rest of the dollars right now, we want to pause just for a little while, and before we obligate those funds, we may need them for things we don't know about. And so we're going to take a little break and use those funds where the customers need them most. And so we'll talk about that throughout this presentation. And that brings us to our revised rate recommendations for this next year. We have worked on this for the last few weeks very diligently, and we are now requesting no rate increases for this next year. As you recall, Mark in the fall talked about no rate increases for gas and electric. We also talked about a rate increase reduction in wastewater, and that no fees or rate increases will be applied to the basic service charges. Well, today we're additionally adding some more detail to that. We are now deferring all rate increases for all 4 utilities, including water and wastewater, until next year. We'll need those funds in the long-term plan, and so next year we may come back with some additional rate increases. But right now, we don't think it's prudent that we raise rates given the situation we have going on in the country. We also intended last year, when we talked to you all last year about changing our small commercial program to allow for demand charges. We're going to recommend that pauses also. We'll do that next year, and so that will not be on the agenda for next month. But we do want to move forward with our time of use rates. That's a program we think will have a lot of benefit to our customers, and we think it's something that will be received well, and so we'll make that recommendation. We'll also want to recommend that we change the purchase power agreement adjustment, which will allow us to put that time of use rate into place. And so those are the things you will see in the next couple of months. I feel good about these recommendations. We worked really hard to make sure that we are affordable, and we will make sure we maintain the trust that we have with our community. So let me turn to the agenda for the day. We're going to recommend some new investment programs and some new water efficiency programs. And I'm going to ask Susan Edwards, our Chief Administrative Officer, to cover that in her presentation. We want to make sure that we bring these new ideas to your attention. After her, Darwin Haygood, our Chief Operating Officer, will give you an overview of our fiscal year 21 programs. Normally we'd give you 10 years worth of projects, but given the environment and what we're in, we're going to focus just on next year's projects and what we're going to do in the next 12 to 15 months. And then lastly, Mark Walker, our Chief Financial Officer, will touch briefly on the long-term plans. but dig real deep into this year's rates and budget and overview of that. And so before I turn it over to Susan, are there any questions that you have for me?
I had a question, Gabe. I thought Kathy was going to be calling on us, but I guess not. My question is this: how are we monitoring construction sites and just basically our operations folks over on Middlebrook with regard to the virus?
That's a great question. Thanks, Celeste. So yeah, the 2/3 of our company has to come to work. They work in the field, do a lot of the operations and construction and maintenance of our systems. We have, and for example, in a lot of our operations, we have separated them into multiple buildings. They're basically in isolation. And so a lot of our operators and folks like that are not working by themselves amongst many of our campuses to maintain the system. The folks in the field, we're encouraging and strongly encouraging, actually, they social distance. They don't, stay away from each other as much as possible. That's not entirely possible in some cases, but to make sure that they follow all the protocol and proper procedures for separating themselves. A lot of the tailgate meetings now, they step around and get 6 to 10 feet away from each other and have a conversation. And like I said before, we give them lots of PPE and lots of stuff they can use, hand sanitizers, things like that, to do the best they can. It's been well received. We do look for suggestions from those folks, and we try to incorporate those quickly. But they are very cognizant and very aware of what's going on, and we're doing all we can to make sure they're safe.
What about our contractors that are working on those sites?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. We've encouraged them to follow all the CDC recommendations, and we've sent them multiple letters and correspondence to make sure that they follow those. And it's what we can tell, they're doing a great job with that. We constantly keep an eye on that. Of course, we have inspectors on those jobs, so we can see that. And so it seems like everybody's following the rules really well right now. I would say that overall.
Does that finish your questions, Commissioner Herbert?
Yes.
All right. Next, Commissioner Pinnell has a question, and Commissioner, please remember to unmute your microphone in order to ask your question.
My question has to do with the suspensions of payments and waiving of fees. Do you have a set timeline or anticipated timeline for that? And you might be covering this later, which is fine, you don't have to answer it now. Or is this going to be covered partially by the TVA additional funds that we're getting for signing? You might have said that, I didn't.
I did not. I appreciate the question. We do not have a set timeline. We're kind of waiting on a lot of things like in the country and the state and even locally to, return to normal, which may be months. We'll kind of monitor what's going on as far as orders that are given by the local officials and state officials. That will probably give us some indication of when we can start going back to some normalcy. But even if we do, we're going to have a very generous payment plan per se. We want folks to have time to pay the bills that they owe and not put it on them too abruptly. So we're going to be really careful and really cognizant of what our folks are going through and our customers are going through. And so we don't have a plan for when it ends, but we do have a plan for sustaining it as long as we need to. As far as part 2 of your question, I forgot, Sarah, what did you?
My question was about the additional funds that we're receiving for TVA. If that is, you already know what that's going to be used for, or is that partially going to be allocated for this, which is an emergency? And I thought maybe the suspensions, et cetera, would be part of our emergency fund for storms that, you just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's part of why we're not going to recommend we use up all those dollars today. We're going to allocate what we do for low-income weatherization, But really, you're right. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, and we'd really have those funds in a kind of a holding pattern, because if we need it for an emergency, for customers, for whatever, those dollars will be needed in those situations. You know, last month we talked about reliability projects and things like that. We're going to take those off the table just right now until we get a grasp of how long this is going to last and what impact it has on our customers. And so those dollars are going to be held in reserve, if you want to call it that. And we'll see what goes on as we need to allocate those dollars. We will to the right sources. So yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next we have a question from Commissioner Small. If you would please unmute your mic and go ahead and ask your question.
So Gabe, I think Commissioner Pennell asked sort of what I was thinking about, which was, is there an estimate in terms of the financial impact that COVID-19 will have on KUB, and is there an opportunity to recover some of those funds through federal sources?
We hope there'll be some reimbursement. We are tracking it as though there might be. We don't know yet. We've not heard formally that's the case, but we are tracking it and accounting for it all. So that'll be great if it happens. But we are, we are tracking the costs, I say the least, about what this is incurring to us. We're also tracking, what our customers are seeing. We're also tracking what our commercial and industrial customers are seeing. And so there's all those factors. We are fully aware, and the number grows every day, but we also want to make sure we're ready for their needs when they come. But we hope it's reimbursable, yes.
Right. And two other questions, if you will.
Yes.
So as you think about the consent decree and that going away in 2021, is there any thought, is that going to free up some additional budgetary monies that we could use for other things to reinvest in either our customers and communities or into KUB?
Once we got from the consent decree, that'll be a huge burden as far as the requirements of the EPA. Financially, It won't change a lot because we've got to maintain the system that we have fixed, if you want to call it that. But as you will see later on, we are committed to reducing our debt. That utility has the highest debt by far. And so we want to pay that debt down and also maintain as low a rate increases as we can. And Mark's going to cover that in a lot of detail. But I don't know that it necessarily frees up a lot of money, but allows us to maintain and have some control over what we do going forward.
Right. And then last question was about time usage rates. Have we thought about how we're going to roll that out to the community? Are we going to do certain neighborhoods? Is it going to be a sign up as you can?
We are actually be voluntary. People that want to do it, think they can take advantage of it. We want to make sure we want to make sure it's very successful because it is different. We think those who can do it will do it well. We want to educate them and ourselves along the way. So it'll be a pilot, voluntary type program. In the long term, it may become more permanent and become more across the community. So it'll be really a voluntary thing. And we want to make sure, like I said, we don't want somebody to sign up for a program and end up hurting them. And so we want to make sure we do this very, very carefully. We think it's going to be very successful. And we'll want to make sure we hold the hands of our customers along with ourselves to make sure it's very successful for everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we have another question from Commissioner Pennell. If you'd unmute your mic, Sarah, and go ahead and ask your question.
So not to belabor this, but my business is looking at the PPS grant, and it seems like, it'd be great, but very bad business decision if you're going into debt and can't be forgiven.
Right.
So the other thing was we played Monopoly last night as a family, and I lost really badly. And as I was mortgaging all these fake properties, it really did make me think of, those people who, you can extend their bill however long, but if there's no skin there, there's no skin there. Would we ever consider doing something like the government is doing? Is if you qualify, perhaps this loan up to a certain point can be forgiven. Do we have the ability to do that?
We do not have that ability, but I will say there's lots of opportunities for additional funding through other agencies, through other programs, I hope federally. But I will say we're going to exhaust everything we can think of to help our customers. We're constantly monitoring and asking those questions because I agree with you. It's going to be tough, and we got to do all we can to help our folks out. So our customers out. So I think it will evolve very quickly over the next few months, and we will figure this thing out and make sure our customers are fully aware of what we can and can help them with. So
thank you. I know you do a lot. It's just, it's crazy time.
it is very. I agree.
Thank you.
All right, are there other questions from commissioners? Hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to Senior VP and CAO Susan Edwards to make her presentation on KUB's low income and sustainability programs. Susan?
Good morning, commissioners. We're really glad to be here today, and I think, as Gabe referred to, we've got some good news for some of the things that you're particularly talking about, and that actually we heard from in public comment just a moment ago. So we're going to talk today about some of the programs that we are proposing to help advance our mission with regard to customer care, particularly for our low-income customers, and in the area of environmental stewardship. Both of these areas are key to our mission. We exist to serve our customers, and we have a long legacy of success in both of these areas. So the investments we're proposing today will help us really advance the ball in both care for our low-income customers and in environmental stewardship. And hopefully you'll agree that these are good investments for us to be making, particularly at this time. We can move to the next slide. Thanks. Let me start by reminding you and our viewers what that foundation is, particularly in the area of low-income assistance. We certainly have a long legacy of care for our customers, starting back in the early 70s when KUB was the first in the Southeast and the second in the nation to have social workers on our staff to help our customers who are having difficulty paying their bills or need access to other local programs. Those customer counselors continue to serve us and our customers well today, and we feel really good about the assistance they're able to provide to people who are in need. Project Help was another innovative partnership that began almost 4 decades ago in 1983 that allows our customers to donate to a fund that supports, again, people who can't afford to pay their bills. And that's the start of a partnership between KUB and CAC, who manages this program for us. I will say that Project Help does have a board of its own, and they met recently to talk about how they could be of more assistance to customers who are having difficulty because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they voted to tap some of their reserve funds to provide more resources for this population, and also to relax their eligibility standards so that they could reach more people. So Project Help's got a long and well-established history of helping our customers, and they continue to do that and to evolve to meet the current needs. Energy and water savings workshops are another way that we've served our community, and we've done that for many years, but certainly in the last year or so, we've upped our game with the assistance of TVA. You all have seen the modules that we've demonstrated at board meeting, and our folks have been out and served about 800 customers with these workshops in the last year. Those also come, as you know, with an energy savings kit that people can take right to their homes and put to work right away. So that's another way we're trying to help people ease their utility bills by doing things that they can simply manage on their own. And then this percolates down to all of our employees. You know, they are very committed to the community, giving of their funds to United Way campaigns in excess of $200,000 on average per year. And also with their time. They donate thousands of hours to dozens of community agencies every year through our Vol Time program. So really from the bottom to the top of the organization, a strong legacy of support for our customers in need. We also have a long-term legacy of environmental stewardship, and that starts with our operations. We've had an alternative fuel fleet since the early 1970s, and I'm happy to report that just in the last week or so, we've been notified that once again this year, we were named one of the top 100 green fleets of the Americas. So we continue to be a leader in that area. Our plants are particularly efficient. They are large energy users, but they make use of the resources that they have. We use about 2/3 of the biogas that's generated during the wastewater treatment process to help run the wastewater treatment plants. And then you are very familiar with the biosolids program that takes the residuals at the end of the process and turns them into fertilizer for the community. So very efficient, and they're always looking for ways to be more efficient at the plants. We more recently have invested in some renewable energy of our own. We have a solar panel array on top of our new engineering building, and we also have one on top of the Mintha Roach building at the Hoskins Center. Together, that's a little over 100 kilowatts of solar energy. So we're always looking to be efficient in our own operations. In the customer side, we've also been early adopters of many of the resources that TVA has brought to the table. And that goes back to the 90s when they first launched the Green Power Switch program and the Generation Partners programs. We were early adopters of those pilot programs, which were really the first chance that our customers were able to access greener sources of energy for their own purposes through the Green Power Switch purchasing program, or even to install their own solar arrays under the Generation Partners program. So we were early adopters of that, strong supporters, and we continue to be supporters of those programs even to this day. We were in the NLX, it was used to be called InterNOC, demand response program, which allows our commercial and industrial customers to enroll, and in exchange for an incentive, they reduce their usage during peak periods on TVA's grid. And that's good because it uses the energy more efficiently valley-wide. It's also good for the customers because they get financial incentive. And we actually participate in this program as well at our plants. The Home Uplift program for weatherization, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but we were early pilot adopters for that. And then most recently, the Smart Thermostats program. Before they suspended enrollment because of the pandemic, there were 350 installations on our system. So our customers are embracing that technology and, again, looking for opportunities to manage their consumption more efficiently. And then finally, we have adopted our own program, the electric vehicle charger rebate that we started last year, and we have about 70 customers who have sought rebates under that program. It's going very well. That's our own particular contribution to this effort. So we have a long history of working in this area as well. Both of these elements come together really nicely in weatherization, and I think we heard from our speakers earlier how important this is to our low-income customers. When you look back at the work that we've done just in the last 5 years in this space, it's pretty impressive. We've served over 1,700 customers with over $20 million of investment in the last 5 years. That came as a result, I believe, in large part of some of the leadership that this board showed in establishing the Rounded Up program to begin with. That was really the first outside source of funding for the weatherization programs here locally that really infused a significant amount of money into that effort. That still is generating about $700,000 a year from our customers. That partnership with CAC, who is the weatherization agency here in town, has allowed us to leverage that for additional resources. TVA certainly has been a leader in that, bringing the significant resources of the Extreme Energy Makeover program and later the Home Uplift pilot program in support of Rounded Up. So all that work has been really outstanding, and we think has shown some real leadership for this community. Unfortunately, we know there's still a lot of people who are not served. There's about 3,000 people on CAC's waiting list, and even with these resources, we know it takes a long time to work through that backlog. And that's why this year we are proposing that we add $1 million to the weatherization program using part of the proceeds from the TVA partnership credit. About $500,000 of that amount would go towards this weatherization program, and then another $500,000 from our natural gas division. That will support the weatherization program with an additional $1 million, which is important. We'll also be able to leverage some matching funds from TVA through the Home Uplift program, which they're now taking valley-wide. And they have told us that we can expect about $361,000 in matching funds from their program this year. So if you add together our $1 million that we are proposing, the $361,000 from TVA and the $700,000 from our own customers, that's about a $2 million investment in weatherization. And if just to put that in perspective, I looked at the budget for weatherization statewide in 2019, and statewide, the funds that come from the federal government through the state, it's about $4.6 million. So I think the $2 million that we're able to add to those baseline resources will really make a difference and help us to start making a dent in that waiting list. The second program I wanted to talk with you about is one that you heard from Mike Boland about earlier this year, and that is a low-income efficiency program targeted at our water and wastewater customers. We know that especially for low-income customers, the water and wastewater portion of the bill can be a pretty significant part of their utility costs. And although weatherization is great, it doesn't really address that part of the bill. So this proposal is to do a toilet replacement program for our low-income customers. It would be a direct install toilet turnkey deal, very similar to the weatherization model. CAC has agreed to be our partner in this. And we think this is a real win-win, because if you can eliminate one of the highest water using fixtures in your home, replace it with a low flow toilet, you'll save on your water bill, but you'll also save on your wastewater bill. So it's sort of a 2-for-1 benefit. We are also talking with TVA, and they have been very supportive in working with us to also bring some energy savings measures on site while we're doing this work. If we're in the house already, it would be very easy to add some things like LED light bulbs or some weather stripping, something short of full weatherization, but again, gets those customers moving down the road to a more affordable utility bill. CAC has agreed to be our partner in this. It's very similar, and in fact, this is modeled on the weatherization program model. Owners and renters will be eligible, and we hope to get this started later this year. Our plan is to fund that directly with $500,000 from our water division, and we're really excited about this new initiative, which we think will make a real difference for some of these customers. Switching gears now to some of the some projects that we have in the solar space, I wanted to talk to you about our community solar initiative. And I think we've mentioned this to you previously, but a community solar project is really aimed at helping all customers have the benefit of a solar installation without the difficulties that come with owning that yourself. You may not be in a position to own your own solar array, maybe because you don't want to or can't afford to make the upfront investment in solar. Maybe your house is not suitable. Maybe you don't own your home. There are many reasons why an individual customer might not be able to invest in solar on their own. So a community solar project sort of fills that gap. A utility or a large entity like KUB will build a larger solar installation, and then customers who are interested will subscribe to that solar resource and use the output that they subscribe as a match against the power that they're using on their primary site. So we've been working on this project for some months now. We submitted it as part of a TVA flexibility research project program, and we just learned this morning that it actually has been approved, so that's very good news. Our plan is to work on this. It's about a $1.5 million investment of cost. We're working in partnership with the city, and they have really helped out with the site. So if you look at the map there to the right, that white building in the center of the map is the city's public works complex, and to the north is Middlebrook Pike. Lorraine Street runs down the center of that map, and then the interstate is to the south. Those yellow bars there in the middle are about 2 acres of that property, which is owned by the city and which they have dedicated for us to use for this project. We believe we can get up to about 700 kilowatts of solar on that site, and we're really looking forward to getting that up and going. I think it's a good site because it's right close to the interstate. We hope that will generate some interest from customers. And we're in the process now of standing up a project team that will work on all the details of getting that project built and the business rules that will go around the subscription process. There's lots of different models, lots of different ways to structure it. And now that it's been approved, we're going to get started on what that is going to look like. So we're very excited about that project, and we appreciate the partnership of the city in getting it down the road, and TVA as well. The last item on my agenda is the Green Invest solar purchase. I won't spend a ton of time talking about this because we did talk about it in great detail in March, but as you know, this is the other primary use that we had identified for a portion of the partnership credit from the long-term contract, and that is for the purchase of 212 megawatts of new solar for our customers. This is an agreement between us and TVA that brings those benefits to our customers, and that was the first two-party deal like that they had done under the Green Invest program. It's sort of a first of its kind investment. When it's online, it will bring us enough power for 35,000 homes. That's about 8% of our load, and as you heard at the board meeting last month, really helps us advance towards the carbon emissions goals that have been set for our community. So in closing, hopefully the things that we've talked about this morning really demonstrate that we do have that commitment for our low-income customers. We think the new investments in weatherization will really help address those long-term issues around energy affordability for our low-income customers. And the water efficiency program really makes some new ground around the water and wastewater costs that those customers face. On the environmental side, community solar is just another option that we're giving our customers who want to invest in solar here locally. And the Green Invest program, we think, will have benefits for all of our customers. So we're looking forward to getting all these programs up and going in the new budget year. And that's all I had. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Susan. We do have a question from Commissioner Pennell. Commissioner, if you'd go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question, please.
Susan, you showed a couple slides, one which said that additional $1 million is going to be invested into for low-income support, with a $336,000 or $331,000 match from TVA. And then the next slide had $500,000 from KUB. Is this in addition to the $1 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to be clear, the $1 million for weatherization, we would fund half of that from the partnership credit on the long-term contract. So $500,000 from that. Okay. And then $500,000 from our gas system revenues. And then the $361,000 is actually money coming from TVA through their home uplift program that would also go in to support that. So those are the funding sources in addition to Rounded Up that would go towards weatherization. On the water efficiency program, that was $500,000 additional funding that would come from the water division to support that project.
Okay, thank you. My heat turns on and it's very loud, and so sometimes I can't hear very well. So thanks for clarification.
Yeah.
That was all.
All right. Are there any other questions from other commissioners? Just a reminder that you'll need to unmute your mic in order to ask your question, and I would ask that you please state your name before the question. So do we have any other questions before we move on?
I've got a quick question. John Worden.
Go ahead, John.
Susan, how much in the way of discussion and research have we done? I know we've talked about it into the landlord tenant relationship and the lack of landlords in updating their energy efficiency. It seems like that's the big elephant in the room. And I know that some of that it might be legislative from a city or county ordinance. But what kind of study have we done on our end as to how we can improve the lives of tenants who are living in a inefficient leasehold arrangement?
It's a great question, and I know we have talked about that before. It certainly is front of mind for most of the people who work in this area. I know CAC faces it. I know the city is aware as well. Our solution has been really to advocate to be sure that these programs are available also to renters. And we have worked with TVA on that as well, because while we recognize that there is some concern about you're making an improvement to a building that the renter doesn't own, but in the end, if they're responsible for the bill, that has been the way to really make a bigger impact on their situation. So it is an issue. It's something we talk about a lot, and I know the city is aware of it. We don't have a lot of tools to deal with it ourselves beyond what we are doing, which is to make sure that we're making the access as available as possible. Does that help?
Yeah, and the sense that I get from talking to people is that what we have are some property owners who have significant holdings who are how can we call it, frequent flyers when it comes to lack of inefficiency. And a lot of tenants who sign up are unaware that they are walking into a lease, sometimes a year or longer, in a incredibly inefficient situation. And I just hope that maybe that's something that can be brought into all these discussions with the city as to how we can. Some of these folks need to be held accountable for the condition of their of the properties that they're putting out to the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Hamilton, this is Tavi Small. I think I have a statement more so than a question, and I think I am on the same line of thinking with Commissioner Wharton, and that if we could work with the city and maybe KCDC to give folks some information, to acquire information for potential renters in terms of, if you move here, this is what the utilities has historically been, maybe over a 12-month period, so that people will have that information up front if they decide to sign a lease, understanding how much the utilities are, because many times we do what we can do on our end, but if they're in a place where there's no weatherization, there's leaks and they're not being fixed by the landlord still gets their rent every month, but then the customers is stuck with extraordinarily high bills that then we have to work through, and we get them over this month, and then the next month it's another issue. So if there's anything that we can do with the city, and a couple people that have contacted me, many of them were getting vouchers from KCDC, and so I was able to talk to them to say, hey, we're paying this, you're giving this person rent every month, and this is how the customer is suffering. So I just hope that we could do something along those lines. Susan, everything else you talked about was phenomenal, because many of us have talked about how we can support our particularly our low-income customers, and I think doing some of these things that we talked about will absolutely go a long way on our part to supporting low-income customers in our communities. But I do think it has to be, particularly when we talk about energy burden, it has to be a collective effort. So for what it's worth, I think that these are some things that we need to really think about strongly.
I believe I'm right, and Mark might be able to confirm, or we can confirm and get back to you, that our customer counselors do some training in that regard, particularly for Section 8 voucher holders, where they encourage them to check the utility balance before they sign up with a landlord. So I think that work is still going on. I know it has been for many years.
Yeah, Susan, this is Mark. That's correct, and also I think an important point is when weatherization is done on rental properties, that the landlord does sign an agreement that ensures that they would take no action against a tenant or evict the tenant within a 2-year period, I believe is what it is. So there are some safeguards that are included to make sure that the landlords aren't just getting the benefit of the weatherization and then turning around and trying to get new tenants and to profit from it in some way. So there are safeguards in place for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Small. I think that's a subject that we've discussed a few times, and I think we're all in agreement that that's definitely something that we need to follow up on and see if maybe somehow in a partnership with the city, or perhaps even by city action, that's something that maybe we can address and make that a little bit more transparent to a potential renter. We next have a question from Commissioner Askew. Commissioner Askew, if you would unmute your mic and ask your question, please.
Hi, Susan. I think you're primarily responsible for communication in addition to all your other duties. Could you talk just a minute about how we let the community know about these programs? When by the community, I mean the potential beneficiaries of all these programs. I'm particularly interested in how people get to know about the weatherization programs. I think we work in partnership with CAC on that, and I know they do a lot of that work, but I think we have a pretty effective communication network, but I would like to hear more about it.
Yeah, certainly CAC is a strong partner. They are the intake mechanism for a lot of programs, and so they are in a really good position to identify people who would benefit from these programs that we're offering. Our customer counselors are another really great resource. They already refer our customers who have difficulty to not only project help, but a lot of community programs as well. So they're a good resource to direct people in that way. I think, we have a waiting list of 3,000 people, so it's clear that the word is getting out, that there certainly is a need there. But you're exactly right. We'll continue to make sure that that word gets out through our own messaging as well, and just continue to look for opportunities to spread it far and wide.
All right. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Hearing none, then I'm going to turn the meeting over to Senior VP and Chief Operating Officer Derwin Haygood for a presentation on KUB system improvements. Derwin?
Good morning, Commissioners. Commissioner Pennell stated a little bit earlier that these are crazy times, and we agree. We've put a lot of effort into creating our plans and long-range plans, and then we actually have turned around and we've made a lot of recent adjustments to those plans in response to the pandemic, deferring quite a bit of work that would normally be performed next fiscal year. But we think it's appropriate and manageable given the circumstances. So some of my presentation today could be considered a bit aspirational in nature, with the idea that we return to a certain degree of normalcy in a reasonable amount of time, and that our deferrals are for a relatively short period of time as well. Gabe mentioned this is very much an abbreviated presentation for each of our utilities, focusing primarily on the upcoming fiscal year. And I'll be covering three areas. Of course, safety is of primary importance for all of our work, as well as quality and regulatory compliance and environmental stewardship. But today, we're going to look at what makes each utility unique and its focus in this next fiscal year. I'll also mention a bit about our progress on Century 2 for each utility, and then finally I'll discuss an overview of some of our upcoming projects and programs for next fiscal year. We'll begin with our electric system. As you know, our focus is primarily on reliability. The pie chart to the right represents the causes of outages from last year, and nearly 3/4 of our outages are actually either due to vegetation or from third-party damages, and that's mostly vehicles that are running into our poles. So vegetation alone is responsible for well over half of our outages. In fact, over 60%. And much of that is actually from trees that fall from customer property into our lines. So these are trees that are also outside of our trim zone, not an area where we normally routinely trim. So we're continuing to increase our use of our data to help us determine our priorities and where we need to focus. As you can see, we've got a lot of tools to help us assist with reliability, and we're analyzing the data to help us determine the best solution and to pick the appropriate tool, or in most cases, actually, it's multiple tools to maximize the customer benefits and to enhance reliability. Now, a bit about our Century 2 accomplishments. Nearly half of our 63 substations have been upgraded to date in some shape, form, or fashion. We're also completing our first cycle of pole replacements. We replaced over 20,000 poles, and we're about to start another system-wide assessment of our poles. And we'll use that data from that assessment to drive pole replacement priorities and even our pace going forward, again, using data. Our XLP electric cable is direct buried cable, meaning that it's not in conduit. We've been replacing these lines for 30 years now, and we've made a lot of good progress. We've actually nearing the completion of that program. Only about 23 miles remain, and we expect to be complete with the replacement of those cable by fiscal year 23. Our other cable types is planned to be on a replacement program that'll be recommended from our upcoming electric master plan that we have underway. We've also been installing fiber optic cable in conjunction with our transmission line replacements and upgrades. We've actually already installed 118 miles of fiber out of our 265 miles of transmission lines, and and the remainder of that is to be completed by fiscal year 30. A noteworthy project in our electric system is the addition of another in-feed station, and that's where we receive power from TVA. It's beginning next year, located on Western Avenue near Cumberland Avenue, or Cumberland Estates. And this will be our 10th in-feed station. It provides us additional system resiliency. We're also replacing 2 older transmission lines between 2 substations, and that being East Bridge and Strawberry Plains substations. And of course, we'll be installing fiber as we go. The photo on the right is a photo of our employees performing similar work on a 69 kV line. In this case, they're actually installing a switch on our transmission line. Our system-wide pole assessment, I mentioned previously, will be performed this next fiscal year, and we intend to use that data to prioritize and pace our future replacements. I mentioned that vegetation management is a significant component of causes of outages, and we're increasing our emphasis on vegetation management. In fiscal year 21, we're putting a little more focus on transmission line vegetation management clearing, as well as on strategic trees that are outside of our trim zone. We're beginning to increase our investment in vegetation management this fiscal year by about $2 million, and then in the outer years, we're going to ramp up to $3 million. I want to mention also that our foresters currently are contract foresters. They're not KUB employees, and we've decided to bring that responsibility in-house by this fall. And it'll basically be a wash to the budget, but we're confident we can be more efficient, more effective, and improve the customer experience with that move. Finally, our electric master plan it's already underway. It'll be complete this fall, and it will provide us guidance for the upcoming year's priorities for years to come. And that's actually it for our electric system. I'll move on to our gas, which is our newest system. It's been heavily regulated under federal and state regulations for many years, actually predating our own Century 2 programs. And we'll look at that in a minute. But in addition to safety and regulatory compliance, our focus for our natural gas system is on growth and providing customer choice, which does make it unique than our other utilities. We'll focus on strategic opportunities for extending our gas system to provide natural gas as a choice. And you're aware of our Connect to Comfort program. We're offering several initiatives to provide options and make it easier for our customers to choose and to connect to natural gas. Consistent with our Century 2 focus, we're continuing to replace older pipes. The newer pipe types are higher pressure steel and polyethylene, and the chart to the right shows that we have mostly newer pipes in our gas system. Again, been regulated for many, many, many years. We've almost eliminated all of our cast iron and ductile iron pipe, and that's expected to be completely eliminated in coordination with a TDOT Alcoa Highway project that's underway. And we're using data as well as our gas system master plan to prioritize future replacements. We have 2 growth projects that are noteworthy. You're already aware of the Raccoon Valley expansion to provide energy choice to the area as shown on that map over on the right. The work is being performed by a combination of a contractor as well as KUB crews, and we actually already have a subdivision that's underway and committed to using natural gas in that area. And we've actually received considerable interest by others, including there's 2 industrial customers that are currently using diesel fuel as their primary energy choice. And actually, natural gas is a much more environmentally friendly option. And I think we'll probably be able to work that out. Another project, the Peninsula along Choteau Road in West Knoxville, has residential developments where we're extending gas lines. Again, this provides our customers another energy choice and an option for them to consider. We're investing in system improvements as well. We have 1 small portion of pipe installation necessary to complete, as you all are aware, of our South Loop Resiliency Project that came along Alcoa Highway. This project actually involves replacing about a half a mile of smaller diameter, higher pressure steel with 16-inch pipe. And then the John Sevier Highway and Downtown West projects are two other higher pressure steel projects. That's a typical Century 2 project where we're replacing older pipe in fiscal year 21 and 22. And just like our electric system, we're conducting a master plan for our gas system to help guide future system improvements. We'll move on to our water system. Several years ago, we developed a multi-project and a multi-year plan to provide resiliency for our water plant treatment processes. We're continuing with that effort. We're also improving resiliency on our distribution system, and we'll mention a bit more about that later. In 2006, our system consisted of half old pipe types and half new pipe types. Now we've got about a third of our system with older pipe types. So 2/3 of our system now have newer pipe types in our system. And you can see the results on the chart to the right. We have a 50% reduction in water main repairs since 2008. I think that's noteworthy of a Century 2 investment. The red bars on that chart represent our galvanized pipe, and you can see the correlation between reduced repairs and reduced galvanized pipe in our system. I think we're attacking the correct pipe at this time. I'll note that galvanized pipe is expected to be eliminated out of our system in the next few years. I also want to remind you, of course, that water pipe breaks increase in extreme weather conditions, whether it be cold weather, rain, droughts, and the pipes most impacted generally are older pipe types. So we'll continue to strategically replace the older pipe types based on data and analysis of that data. We're making progress on our plant resiliency projects as well. The photo on the top is one of our 4 generators that's being delivered. That provides power resiliency should, for example, if TVA had a prolonged transmission-related event that might impact our power availability. The photo on the bottom is a conceptual figure of our filter project. The filters are basically the backbone to a water treatment process. And so this project includes constructing not only filters, which would be housed in that main building shown on the schematic drawing, but also a tank for backwashing or cleaning the filters, as well as a backwash basin at a cost of about $58 million to occur through fiscal year 23. We're investing in a couple of system resiliency projects. We want to, there you go, thank you. The first one, our Straw Plains Pipe Pump Station and Transmission Main, includes a 4 million gallon a day pump station and 2 miles of large diameter pipe, 24-inch diameter ductile. The project provides resiliency as well as growth opportunities in East Knox County for our Midway Business Park, and then actually for 2 of our largest customers who are our wholesale customers in the eastern portion of our system, the town of Dandridge and the Shady Grove Utility District. Another system resiliency project is our new pump station that is to be installed on Hilton Road. It'll provide flexibility as well as improve resiliency in the western portion of our system. And that design is currently underway, with construction expected to be complete by fiscal year 23. So now we'll move on to our wastewater system. And I want to mention next year is very important to our wastewater system. It's the final year of our consent decree, of which much of the focus was on reducing SSOs or sanitary sewer overflows. We're also replacing our disinfection methods at 2 of our wastewater treatment plants, the last 2 being Kauai and Fourth Creek. And as you recall, we're moving away from gaseous chlorine to alternative, safer technologies. So while we've completed the specified system projects that were outlined in the consent decree several years ago, we are continuing to upgrade our pipelines and pump stations throughout our system, and it's an ongoing investment consistent with our Century 2 focus. The map on the top actually shows 47 manholes in which were hotspots or problem overflow manholes in 2004. These hotspots were remedied some time ago, and in fact, just a handful of years ago, we actually had 0 hotspots, no hotspots in our system. However, as you know, our system can be impacted by excessive rainfall, and as we all know, we've had our own fair share of rainfall over the past couple of years. This year is definitely no exception. And so on the map on the bottom shows that we currently have 6 hotspots today, and we have those planned to be addressed with system upgrades through fiscal year 23. Commissioners, I'm proud to say that all of our consent decree projects to date have been completed on time, and our final consent decree project, as you are aware, is shown on the photo to the right, our BEHRC, Biologically Enhanced High Rate Clarifier, at Kauai, is expected to be complete well before the deadline of June 30 of 2021. We also have several noteworthy projects in addition to the Kauai project. We'll be replacing one of the largest pump stations in our system. The new 15 million gallon a day Jones Street pump station serves about half of South Knoxville. The project includes a new pump station as well as a new pipeline that'll be under the river and expected to be complete in fiscal year 22. And our plant disinfection projects I mentioned previously come at a cost of about $11 million through the next few years. The next portion of our phase Sequoia Hills Sewer Rehab project is phase 3. Will be completed in fiscal year 21 in the eastern part of the neighborhood. I will make note that the 4th and final phase is a couple years out, and it'll be a multi-year project to upgrade a trunk line and a force main on the eastern part of the neighborhood. So in closing, I just want to mention there's a lot happening with all of our 4 utilities, and all of our employees are engaged and they're responsible for making it all happen. Our employees are also involved in the community. These photos are showing some of the ways that our employees share their passions and their knowledge and expertise with the community. You can see that not only are they educating about utilities and safety, but they assist in various ways, including community cleanup efforts like river rescue and adopt a highway. And commissioners, they're excellent ambassadors in the community as representatives of KUB. With that, that's a conclusion of my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, we have a question first from Commissioner Pennell. If you'd go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I have 2 questions. One was the gas pipe break slide. It showed the bar graph. And
that was a water break slide?
Oh, maybe it's the water break.
Yes.
It was right before the resiliency slide. Could you mind bringing that up for a second?
Go back to there.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. This is it. I'm looking at the size of the colors where cast iron and galvanized, etc. It seems that the plastic pipe is getting larger as far as the, am I reading that wrong? It's getting larger as far as the,
No, you are correct. We're continuing to look at that. We think there might be some constructability defects as we have to examine every single leak to help determine what the true cause was.
Sure.
And so we think that some of that is a defective pipe. Some of it is maybe some, we did take over a utility in East Knox County many years ago, and perhaps the quality of the pipe in that area for plastic was not what it should have been as well.
Okay, I was wondering if it was just because there was more plastic pipe in the system, and so it looks like there's just more break, just the nature of you have more of it out there, then you're going to see more of it, you know, possibly breaking, or if we're finding that maybe it's not as effective or as strong as maybe we once thought.
We still feel it's an appropriate pipe type for our system.
Okay, thank you. And my second question has to do with the cost slide. I think it was your last or second to last slide, maybe, where it said the cost of the consent projects.
Yes.
Yes, this slide. So I assume that those costs do not include the financing cost attached to it, all of our, the interest that we're paying on debt that was taken out to finance the project costs?
That would be correct, I believe. Mark, you can chime in, but these are burdened costs, but not the financing component.
Yes, Derwin, you are correct. And if you were going to add that to it, you're probably tacking on another $250 million.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at that cost, but also amazed at the amount of work that's been done to, for the consent decree. It's just incredible. But I just don't want to lose sight of the cost to actually do there is another associated cost to these that's beyond the, bricks and mortar kind of cost.
Right.
That was all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a question from Commissioner Askew. If you'd go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question, please.
Darwin, a big part of our issue in the beginning, which led to the consent decree, was the failure on the part of the city's stormwater system. Are we working at all with the city to make sure that doesn't happen again? I have to tell you, as I drive around the city, after big rains, I continue to see lots of problem areas. And my fear is that if the city doesn't keep up with the stormwater system, it's going to negatively impact our wastewater system. And so, can you talk at all about any efforts we're making to work with the city to make sure that with all the construction we've got going on with the expansion of residential areas throughout the city, and frankly, if you'd like to tag on to that, any work we're doing with the county, because a lot of the construction is outside of the city limits. So I just really fear that we're going to do all this work and then end up back where we were if the stormwater system doesn't keep up. So any comments you have about that, I'd appreciate.
Sure. I'm proud to say we probably have some of the best relationships we've ever had with the city since I've worked here, and I've worked here for 30 plus years. So I'm pleased. Number one, we work very closely with their engineering group and other components with the city. So I think we've got a great relationship. And I think they are working along with us. I want to add that what we've seen the last couple of years as well from a rainfall standpoint is historical in nature. So really a lot of the rainfall events that we've seen, they weren't designed to take care of this kind of condition. They are very unique rainfalls. We've got 10-year rainfall events and 50-year rainfall events. And you really can't realistically, affordably design to take care of systems to keep all that water into the pipes and the channels that they're supposed to be in. So I think the city is doing its fair share right now. We really appreciate their partnership. We just can't, you can't design and plan for these type of storm events.
Let me just say my comment, I completely concur and join you in celebrating our relationship with the city. It's better than I ever remember it being, and we enjoy working with those folks. So this was more of an engineering question than a relationship question.
Sure. Yeah, and again, I think my answer is they are definitely working with us. They're making us aware of issues. We're making them aware of issues. We have projects together that we work on solutions. But again, I still want to say that these last 2 years of rainfall events are definitely an anomaly, and we wouldn't have been able to realistically expect the city to have remedied these type of storm events or flood events, just like we can't reasonably keep all that rainfall out of our system in these type of storm events.
Well, I would also say that as we move forward, I hope this is not the case, but with climate change the way that it is, we're going to have new expectations about rainfall and things like that, I think.
It's very possible. You're right.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other questions from commissioners before we proceed? Hearing none, I'm going to turn it over to Senior VP and Chief Financial Officer Mark Walker to present the financial plan. Mark?
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. Good morning, Commissioners. I will have the final segment of our workshop presentation today, and I'm going to give you an update on our long-range plans for each utility system, our 10-year plans. Also talk a little bit about the rate action items that will be recommended for board approval at the May and June meetings, and then I'll close out with a brief overview of the proposed budget for FY21. Beginning with a summary of our 10-year financial plans, you will recall last November, we did review our long-term plans with the board. That is when we announced that we would have no electric or gas rate increases for several years, including the upcoming fiscal year. We have made some adjustments to those plans since then, in particular in the last few weeks in response to the pandemic, and I'll touch upon those in just a moment. But some of the key highlights, which we've already touched upon in various forms earlier today, but our long-range plans do continue funding for each of our Century 2 infrastructure programs, and that's obviously very important. It also continues funding for our water plant resiliency initiative and several other key programs and initiatives like grid modernization, really which all are designed to help ensure that we continue to provide safe and reliable services for both current and future generations of customers. And I know Gabe talked earlier and showed the blueprint, and it's part of a balanced perspective, which I really believe we have at KUB, which ties into the second bullet point, and that we have added about $25 million in total new investments for sustainability projects and also for energy and water efficiency programs for our lower income customers, because we want to try to make our services as affordable as possible. So we're really looking forward to that. And as Susan mentioned earlier, $1.5 million for home weatherization and the new toilet replacement program will begin next year. And that's not a one-time thing. That's not just for FY21. We have that going across every year in the 10-year plan. And then, in thanks in large part to some considerable O&M and capital savings compared to last year's plan, we were able to eliminate several rate increases, in particular the electric and gas rate increases. And here recently, we've also made adjustments to our water and wastewater plans and been able to defer planned rate increases for the upcoming year for water and wastewater. So now we have no rate increases to recommend for FY21. And another important point, we've talked a lot about debt over the past few years, and we've ratcheted up our debt levels quite a bit, in particular wastewater system to help fund the consent decree that we just talked about, but also our Century 2 programs, in particular for the electric and water systems. So I am pleased to note that the plans that we'll look at here in a few minutes, we do have, we've taken a lot of debt out from what we had last year, about $150 million in total. So we actually have declining debt funding ratios for all 4 utility systems, and 3 of the systems actually have absolute reductions in debt over the next 10 years, including wastewater. And we'll see that here in just a few minutes. And then as a result of signing the long-term partnership agreement with TVA, we do have the 3.1% discount on our wholesale power rates. That does equate to about $9.5 million per year. Our current electric long-range plan reflects $1.3 million of that. And again, as Susan mentioned earlier, $825,000 of that will go to solar purchases through the Green Invest program, $500,000 for home weatherization. That leaves about $8 million, and we'll talk about that in just a moment as well. And then finally, the last bullet on this slide talks about our proposed budget for FY21. That is the first year of our long-range plans combined, and consolidated it is $962 million. That is actually down slightly from our current year budget, about 0.2% or $2 million. And I'll have several slides in a few minutes that talk about that. We have made some modifications to our long-range plans related to the pandemic, and probably the most notable here just in the last couple of weeks are to defer the planned water and wastewater rate increases we had. I guess last month we were still thinking that we would be going forward with a recommendation for a 5% water rate increase and a 2.25% wastewater rate increase to go into effect this July if the board approved it. However, in the last month, our world has changed dramatically, and we have made some adjustments in our plans to be able to defer those increases. It will likely result in future increases beyond FY21 being a little bit higher than they otherwise would have been in order to make up for that lost revenue. Some other notable adjustments, as you well know, interest rates have taken a nosedive, I think, since we last talked to the board about our long-range plan in November. And as a result, we have made some adjustments in our interest rate assumptions in each plan. And in total, we've taken about $15 million in previously forecasted investment income out of the 4 plans combined. And then another major adjustment, again, really tied into the pandemic and its impact on the economy and the financial markets. The last 4 to 6 weeks, as you know, the stock market has taken a big hit, lost probably close to 25% of its value from the end of last year. And as a result, we anticipate that our defined benefit pension plan and our post-employment healthcare trust fund are going to take a hit as well. And we anticipate that future valuations will have maybe a significant reduction in the funded status of those plans. So we have reallocated about $18 million in planned contributions to cash reserves is now on a different line item in our plans, as we anticipate that we'll have higher required contributions in future years to make up for the investment loss that we're seeing right now, really as we speak. And then finally, back to the TVA wholesale credit for a moment. There is about $8 million of that we have not determined how to use, and Gabe touched upon this earlier with in response to some questions. We do think it's prudent to take a wait and see approach. We don't know right now what the impact of this is going to be on our electric system customers or the impact on the financial condition of the electric system. So we do think it's prudent to hold off and try to assess the situation over the next several months before we would make any recommendation on how to use those funds. And then one last point on this slide, I did want to mention that what's not on here is we're still very early into trying to assess the economic impact. As a result, we haven't made any changes to our revenue forecast for FY21 in particular. Although we do anticipate we will have an impact. It's just hard to gauge what that's going to be. So in response to that, we have identified a number of capital projects and some maintenance work that we are slowing down on to begin the fiscal year. Actually, about $60 million in total that we are going to take a pause on, or actually defer some bids as we assess what that's going to be. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. So as we look forward to next month and what we're actually recommending for FY21 rate actions, looks a lot different than what we were anticipating a couple of months ago. But I think it does bring good news for our customers, particularly during these times, that there are no rate increases being recommended for FY21. And I think more good news is that we are moving forward with our pilot time of use programs for our residential and business electric customers. Those will be optional programs. If the board approves them in the next couple of months, they will go into effect in November. And I think particularly during these times, to give those customers that are participating the opportunity to shift load from higher rates during on-peak hours to much lower rates during off-peak hours, and maybe have some considerable savings on their monthly power bills. And then also we will be doing some amendments to our purchase power adjustment, as Gabe noted at the outset, and that is really in response to how we're going to handle the TVA wholesale credit and how it would flow through, and then also to reflect our new time of use rates as well. So commissioners, now I'm going to transition and move into talk about our long range plans. I actually, after this slide, have several slides that will provide a graphical summary of each plan. But before I get to those, I did want to share with you some of the key assumptions and indicators that underlie our system long-term plans. This is a chart you may recall that you saw last November. We have made a few updates to it based upon new information since then, beginning with our annual customer additions or our customer growth. You will note that you can see the ranges for customer growth for both electric and gas, and then our absolute projections for water and wastewater. The electric, water, and wastewater levels have all been elevated since we showed you this in November. We've added about 100 customers per year to electric and over 50 each, I believe, to water and wastewater. And that does reflect, trends that we were seeing. Now, obviously, that assumption was made prior to the onset of the pandemic. So we'll continue to evaluate, like we will our revenues, to see what impact it's going to have. So we may not achieve those levels in the first year or so. But I am, pleased to report our new service folks continue to be very busy. In particular, our staff that are dedicated to land development. So residential development has really almost continued unabated, at least during the first 5 to 6 weeks that we've been experiencing the pandemic. The next line item shows our residential use per customer. We do have assumptions for each system reflecting historical trends that show customers use less utilities each year. And we have made a few adjustments on that. On electric, we've actually increased the downward trend on electric usage. We've increased that from 0.5% decline to 0.7% decline annually. And for the gas system, it's actually gone the other way. Seeing several years of positive growth in gas, we have reduced that assumption from a 1% annual decline to a 0.5%. So that helped with our gas system financial position. And then finally, Commissioners, the last thing I want to mention on this slide is we are committed to reducing our debt funding percentages and our absolute debt levels in several systems. We have adopted some new targets, and you see those various debt ratio targets for each system in 5-year increments across the 10-year plan. We think that'll help provide us guidelines in order to achieve those. And you can see for the wastewater system in particular, at one time that was above 65%, it's now at 60%, and certainly our goal is to get that below 50% and continue to drive it down over time. And that's that slide. Now we'll begin with the electric plan funding summary, and I'll probably take this first one a little slow and then we'll move quicker through the next 3. But in the upper left-hand side, you can see what our 10-year capital plan projection is for electric, just under $700 million at $695 million. You can see how we have proposed to fund that, about 3/4 through electric system revenues, with a little under 1/4 or 24% through new bonds over the next 10 years. So $167 million in new debt is anticipated over the next 10 years. We will have no bond issue in electric for the upcoming fiscal year, however. We are projected to repay $170 million over the same period, so you actually have a very modest decline of $3 million of electric outstanding debt over the course of the plan. However, you see the electric system debt ratio will decline, and as you saw the revenue debt mix above that, at that type of split, you are going to see that debt ratio decline as more revenue is funding system assets than debt. So we feel good about that. Now moving to the right-hand side of the chart, the upper portion, you can see the rate increases. Obviously, no rate increase in FY21. At this time, we are thinking no rate increase in FY22 as well, then followed by 1% annual increases thereafter. Obviously, a lot of this is in flux beyond FY21, depending upon economic impacts, the use of the TVA credit, how that assessment and those decisions are made will probably influence what those level of rate increases are. But our goal right now is to not have a rate increase in FY22 if at all possible. And then finally, on the bottom right-hand side, the debt service coverage. That is considered to be a stress test for the financial strength of the electric system, and basically it measures each year how many times we can repay our maximum debt service over the life of then outstanding bonds. It is the key indicator that Moody's and Standard & Poor's will look at in assigning ratings to our outstanding debt and any new debt issues. So our target for the electric system is to be able to repay that maximum debt 3 times or greater. And again, it is an indicator of financial strength and a strong financial condition. So the 3.0 level is set because that's really what we need to be close to achieve in order to maintain a AA or higher rating on our electric bonds. And we are projected to achieve that, and you will see as years go by in the 10-year plan, it actually increases somewhat above the 3.0 level. So it does indicate that I think a strong financial position for the electric system, which is also reflected in the strong bond ratings we have from Moody's and S&P. And we'll move on to gas. Gas, as Derwin mentioned a few minutes ago, is our newest system. So a 10-year capital plan of $265 million. It is the lowest of the 4 systems, about $27 million per year. Next year in the capital budget is going to be a little bit higher than that average, as we do have a very large, I guess, growth project in the northern portion of our system territory in Raccoon Valley. And we think we'll have maybe some significant load to be attached to that. But it is a 10-year capital plan that is funded almost exclusively, I would say that, but primarily by gas system revenues at 80%. Only $53 million in new bonds are anticipated over the next 10 years. That's a relatively low amount given historical standards, and they will have no proposed bond issue for gas in FY21. We'll repay $75 million, so you'll have a net reduction, as you can see on the bottom table, from $106 million to $84 million, a net reduction of $22 million. And then the system debt ratio will also drop. And if we reach 20%, that'll be by far the lowest level I've seen gas system in my career here. I think when I started, we had a lot of significant growth and we were up in the 40 to 50% range. So it has steadily declined over time. But yet, if you compare that level to gas system municipalities across the nation, at 30% is still considered to be relatively high. So we're moving closer to the norm. Gas rate increases, FY21, nothing. 22 and 23, at this time, we foresee no need for an increase, but again, that's probably a decision for another day. A 0.5% increase beyond for the duration of the 10-year plan. And debt service coverage for gas, strong. Our target for gas, much like electric, is 3.0, and we are projected to consistently achieve that and actually improve in the coverage level as time goes on. Now water. A 10-year plan, $346 million, about $35 million per year. Funded a little over 60% by water system revenues, 38% debt, $132 million in new bonds over 10 years. And that is the one system where you're going to see an absolute increase in outstanding debt over the course of the 10-year plan. And that's probably not so surprising, a very capital intensive plan. Doesn't quite have the revenue base, certainly of the electric and gas system. But we will repay $101 million in bonds, so you'll have a net increase of $31 million. But I will point out that the system debt ratio will decline very gradually over the first 5 years, and then projected to pick up some pace and hopefully end the plan around 40%. No rate increase in FY21 for the water system. You will note, however, we have made an upward adjustment on the rate increases for the following 3 years in 22, 23, and 24. Those were 5% prior to the deferral of the FY21 increase. So we will have to make up some of that revenue in future years. And then on debt service coverage, our target for the water system is 2.0 maximum debt service, and that is improving over time as well, as we get close to 2.5 by the end of the plan. And then last but certainly not least, our wastewater funding plan, a 10-year capital of $393 million, an average just under $40 million per year. Next year will be higher. The capital budget you'll see in a moment is $59 million for FY21. And that's because of the expenditures associated with the BEHRC project at Kauai, which again is the final project under the CD. The revenue will fund almost 2/3 of the 10-year capital program, which is good. Debt, a little over 1/3, $139 million in new bonds. That does include a $30 million bond issue plan for the upcoming fiscal year. And I think what I really like to see is in that table below, because you see a net reduction in the outstanding level of wastewater bonds, and we really haven't been able to project that for many years now, but you do see it dropping about $48 million over the 10-year plan, and you see a corresponding drop in the system debt ratio from 60% to 46%. And as an aside, I've told my staff for a couple of years now that I'm not leaving here until we get below 50%. So they do have that added incentive to work hard to make that happen. So looking at the rate increases for FY21, no rate increase. We have deferred that. Much like the water system, though, we have elevated the next 3 increases to make up for that expected loss of revenue as a result of deferral of the 2.25 increase. So they are a little bit higher than they otherwise would have been. And then debt service coverage for wastewater. We have a 1.5 target for that. We are going to consistently achieve that as evidenced by our projections. But unlike the other systems, you actually see a downward trend on the wastewater debt coverage. So that is something that will bear watching as years go by. So now we're going to transition for the last time, really, and look at our proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. It does total $962 million. And commissioners, you'll recall that each system is required to have its own budget appropriation in accordance with the charter, as each division is self-sustaining financially. So those individual budgets are $601 million for the electric system, $129 million for gas, $94 million for water, and a little over $138 million for wastewater. Looking at it by cost component, as is always the case, wholesale energy will be the single largest component at $468 million. That will provide for the purchase of electric power from TVA, our gas commodity purchases, and also what we pay the interstate pipelines for the transportation and storage of natural gas. Our O&M budget is proposed at $158 million. That will cover our planned operating and maintenance expenditures for the next fiscal year. The capital budget is proposed at $211 million. The single largest components of that are the electric system and the wastewater system. And then $86 million in debt service payments for all 4 systems combined. Commissioners, you'll recall we have over $1.1 billion in outstanding debt for all 4 systems. The debt service, the payments on those outstanding bonds, both principal and interest, do total $86 million for the upcoming fiscal year. $45 million of that is principal reductions and $41 million is interest payments. And then finally, our taxes and equivalents total $39 million. That includes $33 million to the various taxing jurisdictions like the city and the county for payments for the utility systems in which they're located in those various jurisdictions, and also the federal payroll taxes, which is about $6 million of that proposed budget. So in total, $962 million. So how does that compare to our current year budget? It's actually down 2.1 million, 0.2%, so down ever so slightly. And looking at why it's different and the variances, it's really 2 line items that are driving that. Our wholesale energy budget is down $14 million, reflecting lower TVA rates from fuel adjustments and also lower natural gas commodity prices that continue to tumble quite a bit. Our O&M budget offsets that to a large degree, being up $12 million over the current year. A number of factors driving that. 1.5 million of that variance is our new investments for our new programs for energy and water efficiency for our lower income customers, which we believe is money very well spent. Derwin mentioned $2 million being added to vegetation management starting in FY21 to help improve electric system reliability. And we're also having pension and OPEB contributions being higher. These are required contributions as calculated by our actuary. They're up in FY21 over the current year, which traces back to the poor market investment performance in 2018. You always see sort of a lag of about a year or 2 on our valuations compared to actual investment performance. Capital budget is relatively flat at that level, only up $200,000. And then our debt service budgets are down collectively 300,000, and our in lieu of tax payments are down about 700,000, again reflecting the continued relatively low level of the Knox County property equalization rate. So that's how it compares. And as far as how the budget is proposed to be funded for FY21, right now we are forecasting in total for all four systems combined $857 million in revenues. At that level, it would fund our wholesale energy cost budget, our O&M budget, our debt services budget, and our taxes and tax equivalents, and also about half of our proposed capital budget at $106 million. You can see on the right-hand pie chart, on the right-hand side of the chart, $211 million total capital budget, funded $106 million system revenue. The balance of it's funded by $47 million in new bonds. That's $17 million in water bonds and $30 million in new wastewater debt for the upcoming fiscal year. And then the balance of the capital program funded by $58 million in general fund cash on hand at the beginning of the year, and that's for all four systems combined. So if you did the math, the equation would be 962 million equals 857 million in system revenue plus 47 million in new bonds plus 58 million in general fund cash on hand. Now, I do, as sort of hearkening back to what I said a few minutes ago, in all likelihood, all other things equal, we're not going to achieve $857 million in revenues. It's really too premature, we believe, to try to make a revised estimate of that. So in response to that, as I mentioned, we have identified a host of projects that we're going to take it slow on, take a pause on, and actually defer some bids on some other work. Because to the extent that the revenue doesn't materialize, we're not going to spend $962 million. So we are very mindful of that and keeping an eye on that. And then as we look forward to the May board meeting, we actually will have several official action items for the board to consider official action on, including the adoption of the FY21 budget appropriations. We'll also have a resolution to authorize commitment appropriations for the upcoming fiscal year. And commissioners, you may recall, we need that authority to enter into certain agreements that actually commit KUB to cash expenditures beyond FY21. We need an appropriation to cover that as well. And then we have the new bonds that we would plan to issue. Again, 17 million water and 30 million in wastewater. And then the rate items, we've touched upon two of those. We also have some various housekeeping items that we need to clean up on some of our rate schedules. And so all that will be rolled into one resolution. So right now we're looking at 4 resolutions for board consideration at the May meeting. And then commissioners, I wanted to close with this slide. And I think the title really says it all. We were going to continue to assess the situation. We do anticipate that there will be loss of revenue to fund our operations, and we will need to make adjustments, which we've already essentially done to some extent to slow down certain work to offset that. Another factor that really tied into us slowing down some of our capital work was uncertainty in the municipal bond market. A couple of weeks ago, the muni bond market really didn't exist. There was very little activity at all. Investors were fleeing which was once a safe haven, concerned about state and local governments, the impact on them, their ability to repay debt in the future. And so a very unsettled market. That has improved quite a bit over the last couple of weeks as the Fed has stepped in and done some activity and provided relief to many state and local governments. And so investors are feeling better about it now. And you may recall that back in February, you approved the issuance of debt to refinance about $77 million in outstanding bonds. We went to City Council on March 24th. They approved it as well. And we've sort of been on a holding pattern since then. But with the market having settled down somewhat, we're back on the agenda. We actually got our ratings from Moody's yesterday, and we'll get our ratings from S&P tomorrow. And the bond prospectus will hit the street, so to speak, early next week. and we have an April 29th target date to sell the refunding bonds. So I'll knock on my desk here, and hopefully I didn't jinx it, and we'll be able to make that happen. But we have been planning and developing mitigation strategies. Really chief among those is the identification of $60 million in work to take a pause on as we assess what the potential loss of revenue is, and we wait to see how the municipal bond market reacts in the coming weeks and months. We also have another contingency, and that is our cash reserves. Each of our 4 systems maintain various levels of cash reserves. For electric, water, and gas, it's 60 days of operating expenses, and for wastewater, it's 90 days of operating expenses. And so in total, it's over $100 million for all 4 systems combined. And those funds are there in the event that a system has a catastrophe or there is a financial crisis. And so we may need to actually draw on some of those reserves to help weather the storm, so to speak. And then finally, last point I'll make is the bullet point on customer bills. And just hearkening back to what Gabe said earlier, we remain committed to working with our customers and doing what we can. We know many are going through a difficult time, not only residential customers, but business customers as well. You know, at some point in time to be determined, we'll resume disconnections for non-payment, but we will be working closely with our customers, with our customer counselors, working with them, and doing what we can to have reasonable payment arrangements and terms to help them get through this as well. Because as we talked about with the blueprint, you know, they're the reason we're here in the first place. So we are committed to doing what we can to help them. And with that, that concludes my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mark. We have a question first from Commissioner Pennell. Commissioner, if you would unmute your mic and ask your question, please.
Yes, thanks, Mark, for the presentation. My question is just about the results so far of, you know, kind of the pandemic. It's maybe been a month. Have you seen anything that, or any indicators right away that would tell you that we are at the start of a trend, or is it just still too early?
We have, I guess, more so on our water and wastewater. We have noticed trends of about a 5% off of where we were last year. And so we have done some calculations and just said, okay, what if that 5% applied to all of our systems? What do we think that impact could be, and on an annualized basis? And it would be around $40 million, with electric, you know, getting the brunt of that, so to speak, around 25 million. And the other systems sort of on a pro rata basis, and gas about 6, wastewater about 5, water about 3. That might be considered somewhat of a stress test for that. If indeed we did lose $25 million in electric revenue, which I hope doesn't happen, then you are looking upon a number of sources for that. Cash reserves, as I mentioned, you know, TVA has offered that plan of deferrals for wholesale power cost payments if necessary. We hope we don't have to exercise that, but it's still rather premature, in particular on electric and gas, but we have noticed a bit of a trend on water and wastewater.
You know, I was thinking I'm during running the dishwasher, I don't know, 3 times as much as I usually do, but I guess it pales, my additional use pales in comparison to the use of all the restaurants that are no longer in operation.
Yeah, I think, you know, somewhat from a residential perspective, it's like, well, you know, you might actually see a little bit higher as a result of everybody being home, but it's going to be more so on the business side. Right now, and of course, we monitor this daily, a lot of our larger industrial customers are, you know, keeping on and continuing to use and produce. It's really in that service industry, entertainment industry, where you're going to see the impact, I think, more so on our revenues. I think the residential side is just going to be the ability to pay the bills, and you may see more of a deferral of revenues as opposed to a significant loss of revenue from residential. Well, we look at it every day, and to see as those trends are developing, and we're staying on top of it.
Thank you. I know you are.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from any of the other commissioners at this time?
John Worden, I've got a quick question.
Go ahead, John.
Mark, we're looking in a couple of years at a 5.5% increase on water and about 3.5% increase on wastewater. What is the ratio? I know we've kind of played with that number as to the base rate increase, the basic charges and usage, because that combination of those two in one single year, for certainly for residential, but I guess really for everybody, is quite a hit. What's the makeup between usage and basic charges on that increase?
Well, I think as we look right now, obviously we can do more work on it, but I believe our recommendation would be that those increases would be applied solely to the usage and not to the fixed monthly charge.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions from any commissioners? All right, hearing none, I'll turn it back over to Gabe for closing remarks.
Thank you, commissioners. You know, I appreciate all your patience and willingness to work with us on this. There's been a lot of things going on in the last 4 weeks or so. But I want to thank a lot of folks at KUB that have made this happen in such a short order. First of all, I want to thank our budget staff. I think I've changed the budget at least 10 times in the last 4 or 5 weeks on them, and they've been great to make it accommodate some of the things I've been requesting, along with our rates staff. They have had to run the scenarios multiple times to make sure we're making the changes we need to make. I can't say enough to our communications folks for getting us set up on this remotely. Using electronics means of doing this. This is new territory for all of us. We are adjusting every day, and they made it run pretty smoothly overall, given the sense of urgency. And finally, the executive staff. Like I said, we have had multiple changes over the last 4 weeks to make things better for our customers and to make things work. And they have been extremely accommodating to help to work with, so I can't thank them enough. And finally, for you, the board, all commissioners, thank you for your patience in allowing us to work through this process. Thank you for all the questions. You keep us going, keep our customers served, and we appreciate that. And so, with that being said, I don't have anything else to say, but to say we're going to constantly monitor everything and adjust accordingly and be very, very nimble given these situations. So thank you for that, and that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Gabe. I just want to echo your comments in thanking the staff for this presentation. And thank you to your excellent IT staff and to all the staff that worked with us to make sure that this electronic meeting could come off as well as it did. I certainly appreciate that. And I know all of us on the board appreciate all the work that everyone has been doing to try and make the best of things and to try and serve our customers as we best can in this kind of situation. So thank you very much. So that does it for this meeting. With no further business to come before us, this meeting is now adjourned.